you joining us for this really important conversation. This is a conversation that I love to have with women. Today, Kim and I are going to be talking about, you may have heard of the midlife crisis, but today we are changing the script a little bit and we're talking about the midlife unraveling. So I hope you are as excited as we are about this conversation. If you are here live, please say hello in the chat. We are excited to have you to hear your take on this. Because it's something that a lot of women haven't heard of before, and that's we're hearing that from some of the people in our social media, that some people have not heard of this midlife unraveling. Kim, I'm going to hand it over to you just while I take care of my social media, and then I can talk a little bit more.
Of course, of course. Yeah, somebody's saying that we match. We definitely did not plan that, but
Oh, yeah, we do.
a little bit of a match happening. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. I'm excited to have it because, as Kellyanne said, I had not heard of this term per se until I researched it a little bit, and I'm like, yep, this is exactly what happens. So, all of these conversations we have here on Raw Unscripted, they're to help bring awareness to you, to help you get thinking about your life in some way or another based on the topics that we're talking about. These conversations are just much for Kellyanne and I because we love to talk about it, but they are absolutely for you too. So please be a part of the conversation. Thank you for saying hi. Hello, Jeannie. Hi, Kim. Hi, Angelica. Thank you for being here. So I'm wondering how many of you, when you think of the term unraveling versus the word crisis, because in a moment, Kellyanne's going to talk about the difference between the crisis and the unraveling. But if you think of an unraveling, I'm curious to know, like, what does that mean for you? Even if you write one or two words in the chat right now, what is the word unraveling? Is this a positive thing? Is this something that do you think we're all going to go through it? I'm just curious to know your thoughts on it, because I think to myself, as I've read a little bit on this topic, like, do we all go through this? Is this something that we're all supposed to go through? It's just that not all of us are aware of it, or we do things to avoid it in one way or another, either consciously or unconsciously. Or is this something that maybe not everyone goes through? So, falling, I'm just looking here at some of the chats. I haven't heard of this term, so interested to learn more. Amazing. Thank you so much. And a term of falling apart. So, an unraveling, a falling apart. And I mean, let's look at words. Does falling apart mean that this is a bad thing? Or is this something that is actually such an incredibly powerful, uplifting opportunity for our lives? So I'm going to send it over to Kellyanne, and we're going to get this conversation going.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear people's perspective, because I think we've all heard the term midlife crisis. And so we think of that point in maybe our 40s. Usually, a lot of people think 40s, 50s, where you do something crazy. You are trying to get your youth back, in a sense, I guess. Maybe you buy the fancy car, or you take the exciting trip. But I think, and a crisis to me is kind of a short window of time. It's an intense experience, but it has a beginning and an end. And I see the midlife unraveling as more of a longer term experience, and it doesn't have to be negative. I think it might start out in a bit of a negative way, because, and I think any growth is going to have pain associated with it. So that midlife unraveling, and Kim and I have both walked through this and are continuing to walk through it. So we're going to share a little bit about our stories. But that midlife unraveling is a time in your life where you really start to question how you've been doing things. Is that working for you? You maybe start to realize that I'm not really happy. So, what are the things that I'm doing? Why am I doing them? Why am I in the situations I'm in? And we call it midlife because it often happens as we are getting to the end of being a caregiver for our children in many ways, where we're finished with that taking care of others, or we're getting to the tail end of it. We never finish taking care of our kids, but we're getting to the tail end of where our life has been consumed with taking care of people, of children. um, and we're actually starting to look at ourselves and say, okay, I've taken care of all of these people, all of these situations. What about me? I haven't taken care of me. And in some ways, it can feel like you have lost yourself.
Whew. I feel that, man. I feel that. Thank you. Thank for opening up to that conversation. I also want to just speak to, and again, this is where we are raw and unscripted. So as I continue to talk about topics that I haven't talked about, I give myself grace to do this. We don't have to be a parent to experience a midlife unraveling. We could be the person who has always put other people before ourselves,
Mhm.
the person who made sure that everybody else was happy, the people pleaser, the person who has done everything that they felt they needed to do in order to be liked, to be seen, to keep the peace, to be seen and valued. So, a person who's also trying to control. So, it could be a safety thing. So, always try to keep things perfect around me. And all of these pressures, all of these ways of living, we've got the external. So again, I'll probably speak a little bit about my story right now. For those of you that are learning about my story, I I definitely speak about it from a place of trying to control my body size for 30 years. But underneath my food challenges, my body image challenges, was somebody who was wanting to be seen, somebody who was wanting to be loved, someone who was wanting to be needed, finding my own worth through things that were outside of me. So whether that be doing for other people, but also trying to control and keep this outside appearance of me the way society wanted it to be, boy, I was told it was supposed to be. These are some of my unraveling, right? It was all the pressures. I always talk about being a mother and having all of the balls up in the air and trying to be everything to everyone else, and then recognizing that it wasn't working for me. And I say this, and Kellyanne, just jump in, please, when you wish to. But I think to myself, when I think about this unraveling, I had, like, these are signs from our intuition. So when I'm living outside of me, this is how I can avoid, distract, numb, pretend, right?
Mhm.
Which is actually going to be a little bit of our conversation next week. But ultimately, my intuition, my soul had been talking to me for very, very long, but I wasn't able to hear her, or I didn't like what she was saying to me. So
Mhm.
she would whisper
Mhm.
at me, and eventually she got much louder, which is when my unraveling started.
And I think that's so true. I think that whispering starts for us as things, we start to question things. And it's very easy to say to ignore the whispers, to ignore that little nudge that says to yourself, where you're saying, okay, I'm not really happy, but this is the way, this is what society has told me I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to continue to do it. And you get to a point where, for me, mine felt like I was at a point where I looked at my life and I said, I've done all the things that society tells me are going to make me happy. I've got the education, I've got the career, I got married, I had children, I have the nice house. Why am I not happy? What There's something wrong with me, is initially what it felt like for me. There's something wrong with me. Why am I not happy with all of these things that the world is telling me are supposed to make me happy? And that's where it started for me. And then what happened is that I ignored those nudges. I ignored those things. And sometimes what can happen, and I think, Kim, maybe you can relate to this,
Mhm.
is that the universe says, okay, I've been telling you, I've been whispering for a little while, but now I'm going to give you something to really think about. And
Mhm.
what happened for me is I then endured two of the most painful experiences I've ever been through in my life in my early 40s. And those things caused me to have to pay attention. I could either stay in that space of trying to numb it, you know, um, but instead I turned towards it and decided that, okay, this is my wake up call. It was my unraveling. My life really was unraveling. And sometimes it can be that, that literal, that it feels like things, somebody mentioned falling apart, that
Mhm.
it feels like things are falling apart. But it's in that falling apart that we can come back to ourselves, and that person that has been covered up, that it's like the onion, right? We are in there. Our the essence of us, the beauty of us is in there, but we have been covered with all of these layers of programming, of patterns, of expectations of other people, of society, and we forget who we are. And I think that midlife unraveling is our call. It's our call to become the person, to tear back the layers and to find, it's a remembering
Mhm.
for us of that person that we are being called to be. Doesn't mean it's easy.
No. No, it's not. And I love that, this unraveling, this exploring. People will often say, "Well, we feel like we have to become someone else in this process," but no, it's an actually revealing of all that you have been, and it's not easy. I mean, we s I guess I just wanna say too, I don't feel like it's always like, for me, it was not a conscious decision at all. It was for me, it was like, again, universe came in and said, you're getting sicker and sicker. I'm giving you all the signs." But I held so tightly on to what I felt was my identity. I had a belief that my life had to look like this or I wouldn't be okay. So I held on and I gripped on and I controlled things. But again, what ended up happening is the more I tried to grip onto the things that I felt I needed, the more stressed I became, the more unhappy I became. Like, it was so many emotions. And then it starts to show up in other parts of your life. And so the only reason I believe I was able to allow myself to surrender was because I saw the other parts of my life that I loved so dearly, my husband, my relationship with my children. For me, it was my health. It was the fact I was either going to be here on planet Earth, or I wasn't going to be. I had to let those things lead the way because it's not like I have some tears dropping down here, Kellyanne.
Mhm.
It's not like I knew what I was getting into. Raw and unscripted, Kellyanne.
Thank you for sharing your vulnerability, Kim.
Thank
That's
you.
what it's all about, right?
Yeah, so it's like I didn't know, and so we feel like there's something wrong because we literally feel like, "I think I'm falling apart here.
Mhm.
Like, you need to put me into a hospital." I was reading the article that Brené Brown talks about, and I think it's important. Maybe we'll link that here for anyone that wants to read it. She talks about how that the mother who could be driving past a hotel or a motel and just wants to check themselves into it. Like, maybe if I check myself in here, people will realize that I'm not okay, because the problem is that what we're experiencing inside of us, it's she says that it's not like people around us would fully get it, right? Like, these are internal experiences that we're feeling. And so to the other person, they might be like, "Oh, maybe you're just doing too much." And you're like, "I've been doing too much and I have not been in alignment with myself for far too long." Or she says, you know, that feeling where you just want to like throw something. You want to just throw something. You want to throw a glass up against a wall, but then you realize you're just going to have to clean it up and you're going to have a toddler who's crying, right? So,
Yeah.
so this is why I love these conversations where we can be real and another woman can say, you know what? I felt that way too. I
Mhm.
felt that way too, because so often we keep all of this inside of us and that helps no one.
You're right. You're right. And I think that, for me, I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know about a midlife unraveling when I started to unravel, when my life started to fall apart. And I remember saying, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this. I don't, everything that I knew how to do up until that point, all the things that had served me really well in my life, all the masks that I'd worn, all the defenses that I put up, all the the patterns that I had, they had all worked really well. I looked like I had it all together. I
Yeah.
don't know about you, Kim, but yeah, I'm sure people looked at me and said, "Well, gosh, she's got it all together.
You
She's
know what?
got all the things that I mean." And there was a lot of guilt in that, because I thought, my God, like, yes, some people would die for my life. Why am I so unhappy? Why are all these things happening to me? And at the time, if you had said to me, someday you're going to be grateful for this, I probably would have slapped you in the face. Because at the time, there was no way I could see how this was going to make me better. And as Steve Jobs always says, and I use this quote all the time, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. And when I look back at that unraveling, that was the beginning of my journey to find myself again.
Mhm.
That was the beginning of the growth. It was, instead of becoming the victim, which I easily could have done, because I had things happen in my life that I felt like the victim for sure. And I could have stayed in that victim role, which I think so many people do when they get to this point in their life. So they can choose to stay there, or they can get curious and say, why am I feeling this way? And start to explore and get honest about, you know what, I've been doing things like this for so long and it has worked for me. I believed that my way of doing things was the right way of doing things.
Well, and
And
it keeps us going, right? It keeps us going.
exactly, I was a right fighter. I was like, no, this, I'm doing it right. Like, this is the way that it's supposed to be. Look at how well it has worked for me. And really, I had to get to a point where I had to say to myself, okay, Kellyanne, this isn't working for you anymore. There has to be another way. You have to be open to looking at another way of thinking or another way of doing things, and you have to let go of what everybody else thinks. Because as long as you stay so consumed with what everyone else thinks, you will not allow yourself to explore that unraveling, because you will keep up the mask, you will keep up the appearances. And I think so many people do that. They just keep um keep the facade going.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would fully agree. I remember, and like for me with my story, Kellyanne, it was because I sought validation from everyone around me. The more people praised me and said, I don't know how you do it all. You're
Mhm.
always smiling. I don't know how you do it all. Tell me how do you do this? Right. That it not only fed my insecurities, okay, puffed up my chest a little bit in a like ego kind of way. My ego loved
Mhm.
that, but it also kept me there, right? Because then my whole identity was built on Kim who can do all the things. And
Mhm.
so again, I remember um like an example. This is like a very small example, but I just remember sitting around a boardroom meeting with a whole bunch of group fitness managers that I was a group fitness manager. And we were all sitting around, and we have a lot of tasks, right? We have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of people that we oversaw. And I remember saying to the table, I was like, how do you keep yourself organized? How do you guys do it all? Because in my world, I was doing like my list of to-dos, my expectations of myself were so big that I just was struggling. And I forget what somebody said to me, but I had to suck back tears. Like I had to like
Mhm.
look up at the ceiling, because at that point I was so vulnerable. It was like right where I was trying to like, keep the balls going, but I was falling apart. And that because that's the thing. I was like, I know I'm not okay here, so somebody else tell me what I'm not doing right, so I can like
Mhm.
smooth this over, so I can keep checking these
Mhm.
boxes. It's such a and you look back on it as you said, we are still just this unraveling. When do
Mhm.
we stop unraveling? I don't know, maybe right at the very, very end of our lives. But I guess it also comes down to when you begin this journey, right? Like when you begin this unraveling, if this happens in your 30s, then obviously you have had less life before you, but we're also
Mhm.
unraveling all of our ancestors and everything
Mhm.
that's inside of us.
Mhm.
But it's conversations like this that really help bring to light what's happening inside of us. So like for everyone that's listening right now, thank you so much for being here and for listening. And somebody has said, I'm trying to drive and listening while tears are rolling. She's remembering her own experience.
Yeah.
And this is what it's about, is we remember, so that remembering helps to continue to keep us in this, because it's so much easier for us to go back to where it was comfortable,
Mhm.
even if that comfortable was uncomfortable. Remember what we've talked about on this show is that our mind likes to stay where it knows, where it's familiar, even if it's not working. So it's way easier for us to fall back into our old patterns. But the fact is, we have to remember, or we have to acknowledge where you are right now. I'm going to just throw out some soul work for you, everyone that's listening. Like today, take a few minutes and begin to get curious with some of the things that you're feeling, those whispers, those nudges that have been coming in. They're coming in for a reason. They're not something for you to ignore, for something for you to put another task on top of so you don't have to deal with it. It doesn't go away, my friends. It'll just
Mhm.
keep coming back.
Mhm.
So we encourage you to let yourself start to get curious with this.
And I've heard the phrase, when life wants you to pay attention, when the universe wants you to pay attention, at first they throw a little pebble.
Yeah.
And then when you ignore the pebble, they throw a rock.
Yeah.
Life throws you a rock. And when you choose to ignore the rock, then you get the boulder.
Mhm.
And I know for me, that's exactly what happened. I got the boulder.
Mhm.
And I don't think people have to get to that point. That's not to say that we're not going to have very challenging things happen in our life, but I see a lot of women in midlife who do have those boulders, um, kind of tossed at them, and they have to make a decision. And as we talked about, this is not an easy process by any means. This is a real it's a time where you really have to get honest with yourself. And being honest with yourself doesn't feel good if you've never been honest. I spent my whole life not being honest with myself
Mhm.
and not really taking responsibility for myself. It was always somebody else's fault. And so when I got to the point where I was all I had, I I had to take responsibility and say, okay, I've got two choices here. I either go down this path of being the victim and living my life as a victim and being angry and being hurt and all the things that came with the circumstances in my life, or I choose a different way and I start to get to know myself better and I start to get to know what I truly want. And instead of paying attention to what everybody else in my life wants, I have to start paying attention to what I want and what I like about me instead of worrying what everybody else thinks about me. The important conversation for me came to, what do I think about me?
Mhm.
Because, and that's a tough one to come to. It really is. And some people will never come to that point. But we're always so caught up, I think, in those early years of our lives with what does everybody else think, that it's hard to really um, start to be authentic and live the life that we really want to live because we have so much programming and so many, paradigms and beliefs that really are not helping us.
Yeah. I want to just elaborate on that one just for a little bit. Our core need as humans is to belong, is to be loved, is to have connection. We need these. These are parts of ourselves. So these masks, these ways that we morph ourselves to be in order to feel, and Brene talks about belonging versus fitting in. How often
Mhm.
are we working on just to fit in? So I will change me. I will say yes to this. I will shut off my opinion, push down my feelings, my ideas, my beliefs so that I can fit in this space.
Mhm.
Whereby belonging means you're living as your authentic self. And so that takes time.
Mhm.
I am in my 6th year of my journey here, and I am every day trying to, and I'm working on it and I'm doing it more and more,
Mhm.
but to be authentically me. And it's not easy. Oh my goodness, these programs, they pull us back, Kelly Ann.
I know. I know. I mean, I'm in probably about my 13th year.
Yep.
Um, and it's still, it's still a challenge. I don't think you ever get to the end of your growth. Um, you just keep uncovering layers. I mean, I'm constantly, I find myself, okay, I think maybe I've figured that one out. And then I find another layer. Oh my gosh, this is another part of my unraveling. So the unraveling can start out as incredibly challenging and it can start out as painful. But if you choose to use it as the catalyst to move you towards an authentic life, to move you towards truly loving yourself, because for all those years, I didn't love me. I didn't even like me.
Mhm.
It wasn't until I started into that unraveling, that midlife unraveling, that I really started to explore why I didn't like me and how I could start to like and love myself again. And that has taken me quite a few years to get there. But what you find on the other side of that unraveling can be so beautiful. So don't fight it. I guess
Mhm.
that's what I want to say to anybody listening. Don't fight it.
Mhm.
Try and roll with it, even though it's going to be challenging. Get curious and allow yourself to walk through it because you can't get to the other side unless you walk through it.
So I'm looking at my flowers in the background and I'm picturing, this flower that is so tight, right? So this is us when we are so constricted and closed and afraid and uncertain and trying to control. But as we begin this unraveling, we open up and we bloom. We bloom because of the essence of who we are. I will also say, when you go through your unraveling, when you are in your unraveling and you start to move through it a bit more, you just feel so damn proud of yourself, because it's not easy work
Yeah.
and not everyone is doing it. And
Mhm.
they're like, and it doesn't matter. Again, we don't worry about other people. We're worrying about ourselves. So we are proud of ourselves for walking this journey with ourselves, because we could easily turn our back. And we're not willing to do that. And I know that everyone that's listening right now is here because they're not willing to turn their back on themselves either. This is what we do for women. We support one another. We are here. If a woman, this is the thing. We never know what another person, and we talk to women. That's why this is, a women's space. But like, we're here for each other, right? Like, if sometimes somebody could do something that's really hurtful, but we have no idea what's going on in someone else's life. So it's like, where can we have these conversations where we can sit with someone and just say, you look like you're holding on to a lot. You look like you're going through something. Is there anything I can do? Those types of little statements, or I'm here for you if you ever want to talk. Those things are so helpful, because they're giving another woman permission to feel potentially what's happening inside of us, because we can be so hard on ourselves.
We can. And again, the reason why we do this show is to let women know that they're not alone. That we might keep these things, our own unraveling, we might keep it from everybody else, but know that you are not alone, that there are other people walking this journey, and many of them have made it to the other side. So search those people out. I mean, Kim and I are certainly, this is the work that we do. We help women to get to the other side, to answer the question, to help them to find the answers within themselves, um, to make their lives better and to create lives that they love. And it's a process. It's a process. And sometimes you need somebody to guide you along the way.
Yeah.
So,
I think
Kim, I just want to, as we end this, you talked about surrender, and I just want to put in a little plug. Tomorrow,
yeah,
I am leading a free masterclass called Sweet Surrender. And surrender is such a beautiful part of the journey. It is truly a gift that you can give yourself to advance you as you walk through life and to create a life you love. So, follow me on social media. It's a free workshop, and I would love to have you share that with me.
I love that. When is your masterclass tomorrow?
It's at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and it will be on Zoom. So the links are in my Facebook and in my Instagram.
Perfect. Perfect. I love that. Surrender is such a beautiful word, a word that has so many different meanings for so many different people. But the word surrender to me is just such a beautiful word. I love it. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for letting me release a little bit. I felt like I released a little bit.
Good. You feel much lighter now, don't you?
I do. I do. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. Once again, my name is Kim Basler, supporting women with their relationships with food, body image, self-worth, and helping them shift their thinking at a unconscious level so that they can live the life that they dream of. Kellyanne, please give your little elevator speech.
And I'm Kellyanne Appleton, mindset and manifestation coach, and I help women stop settling and learn how to create a life that they love.
Beautiful, beautiful. We are here for you. Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. Lots of opportunities to learn from us in whatever capacity you wish. We hope you have a beautiful day. Please share this podcast episode with people that need it, because there's lots of us that need it. We'll see you next Tuesday for our next conversation. We're here every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, or you can catch our past episodes on our YouTube channel. Have a good day, Kellyanne.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.